Welcome to Rauta. This is Nordic Metal Cruise 2025, and this time we have a very special guest from United Kingdom. And before I say it out loud, it's better to ask the man in question, like how it's gonna be pronounced. But first, let's introduce the man of the hour. Sir, please state your name and status in the band.
I'm Dave from Anaal Nathrakh, as I would say it. I don't know how you would pronounce it in Finnish, but yeah, Anaal Nathrakh. I'm the singer. And one of the two main members of the band.
Now, the obvious question, which you have probably answered like a million times before.
Let's do it one more time.
Exactly. First of all, the band title is taken from a movie, am I right?
Yes, yeah.
And why that particular movie?
Sort of, why not? I mean, we like the film. It's a cool film. It's weird. I think it was 1980 it came out. It's like a fantasy film about the Arthurian legend. So don't know how much you would know about that in Finland, but yeah, in England it's quite popular. There was a mythical king years and years ago, and he had a sword called Excalibur,
which is the name of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
you
have
heard of it? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen it, and I remember liking it as a kid. But
yeah, man, it was kind of a little bit cult popular at the time, a long fucking time ago. So yeah, we took it from that, but we weren't really leaning on why to take it from that. It was just like, we want to do some music, we need a name for it. Like that, I've said it in interviews before. What is a Metallica? What does that word mean? It doesn't mean fucking anything. It means the name of the band. And for us, yeah, Anaal Nathrakh, it has like kind of relevance to when we were kids and, you know, what we were interested in then, but we kind of stopped thinking about it probably about 20 years ago. And to us, it's the name of the band. So yeah, technically it's some kind of old Irish language and it means serpent's breath or something, and the serpent is some kind of terrifying thing called the dragon in the film. But we don't really think of it in those terms. It's the name of the band, and that's good enough for us.
And it makes a lot of sense that, I mean, after all, so many black metal bands and beyond have taken a lot of things like out of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, and even, of course, Conan the Barbarian and Cthulhu mythos from Lovecraft. Lots of names taken, but Excalibur is a little bit more indie in a way, or
it's
less.
A little bit more indie. It's a little bit closer to our actual. I don't want to use the word heritage, but I'm not thinking of a different word that comes.
Yeah.
It's kind of a little bit closer to our background, I suppose. And also, using something from Tolkien, I can see exactly why you would have done that in 1991. I can't see why you would do it in, when was it we were starting? Late 90s, something like that, because everyone else has done it.
Yeah.
Cthulhu mythos, I can see that a little bit more. Like a conceptual level, I can appreciate that a little more.
All the Shub-Niggurath and all that's taken.
Yeah, I mean, Morbid Angel did a hell of a lot of that stuff years ago. Shub-Niggurath, the goat with 1,000 young, and all that business. But yeah, I think there's reasons to avoid Lovecraft as well. If you look into his personal history and some of the stuff he was involved with.
You know, likable character.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't call your band Tesla nowadays, and maybe something similar applies. But conceptually, I can enjoy the Cthulhu mythos, and you can find something in that. Lord of the Rings kind of played out. Uruk-hai, like, you know, back in the very, very early days of black metal, before Grishnak was quite so crazy and stuff like that. I can see people taking their inspiration from that, but I like the idea of something that stands a little bit outside, like that common thing. I've got nothing against people who do go down that path, but yeah, something a little bit individual, a little bit quirky, a little bit independent cinema, a little bit strange. Yeah, I like that a little bit.
But obviously, when you chose the name, you were kind of like bound to see that some people are going to make all those anal jokes about it.
Oh, of course, yeah. And some countries you go to, that's actually how they spell their word for anal. And yeah, I think in Russia it means like horse fucker or something, something like that. And in the Netherlands, that's how they spell anal. But I'm cool with that.
Yeah,
fine.
it's so old, so who gives a shit anymore?
Kind of who gives a shit, but also what's wrong with anal?
well, now that you mention, really, that's a good counter question. One thing that I recently bumped into, I realized, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're not exactly putting your lyrics out there.
No.
And there was a mention, an anecdote of sorts that it said like there was one, I think, lyrics video which has some of the lyrics, but more so, why are you not putting those lyrics out there for people to read? Because after all, we're talking about the extreme metal genre where people are like, this is the ideology, or this is what it's supposed to be when you go deeper level than just the riffs, just the maniac drumming and all that stuff. So why not?
Because of that. Right. So if you print your lyrics, it's just there. Everyone can read it. Everyone can think about it. But what we have tended to do is try to include enough stuff so if you read what the title is and actually think about it for yourself, and if there are bits of lyrics that you can hear, and you maybe Google that or look it up and think about it for yourself. That's the important bit. Think about it for yourself. You can start to understand what it is we wanted to talk about. But I think if it's too obvious, then it's too easy. And thinking about it for yourself kind of goes out the window. It's just there, it's on a page. So it's not the case that we wanted to hide what we were doing. Just if you care enough about it, there is enough to find out what's happening. But I don't want to make it any more obvious than that. I don't want to give you something on a plate and you can just read it and go, oh, excellent, what's on TV now?
Yeah, I get it, but you want to kind of have a subtle puzzle thing
Kind
in
of,
a way.
yeah. I mean, we actually did that on one of our albums. There was the album title that we wanted to use in the first place. The label said no. So there was a thing in Russian history. There was a nihilist movement. Because we have links with nihilism. It's kind of, that's kind of our perspective on things. And in Russia, they called themselves the nihilists, and they used a particular code. So we wrote stuff in the album in that code that was like the original title of the album. And it's not difficult. It's not like an entrance exam or something like that. And you don't have to care. We don't care if you care.
That's a very nihilistic take.
Yeah, well, kind of, yeah. But if you do care, then the clues are there. And, I'm happy to talk to people if they want to talk to me about the music or anything, but I would prefer that someone comes to me and says, you know what, this song title that you said, I looked it up, and it linked to, and that meant something to me. So let's have a conversation about that rather than, oh yeah, I like killing too. Or what if you made everything really obvious, the obvious kind of questions. So like I say, it's not meant to be an entrance exam. You don't have to give a shit, but if you do give a shit, there's more in it because you had to pay attention to understand it.
So it's kind of a rewarding experience in a way.
I think so, yeah. And there's been a group online for years called the Anaal Nathrakh Lyrics Research Group, and that's people actually looking for where quotes came from and okay, so if that's a quote from there, then what was that? And if we think about that in the context of the band, then what does that mean? That's people actually engaging, rather than just going, yeah, if you just give them a load of words and they say, oh yeah, blood and stuff.
I'm thinking from this point of perspective, I need to explain this so it makes a little bit of sense.
Please do.
Because of a lot of bands, especially not very native in English language, as sometimes we jokingly or more like a little bit mockingly say, evil English. You probably encountered those words because, from Latin America where people are like not very good in their, English language, and then sometimes these, word plays don't make much of a sense. It's so very clumsy, and you kind of feel like, okay, I get it. It's hard to, do those lyrics when you are not really fluent with that. But then again, there are bands from UK especially where you're like born and raised with the very, very poetry and the Shakespearean background and all. Like My Dying Bride is known for their very talented lyrical content, and you could have all the way because that's where you're coming from. So don't you feel like a little bit like not giving the people the beauty of the language instead of turning it into a puzzle game of sorts?
A lot of the time what we're referring to wasn't written in English in the first place anyway. Some of it was, but a lot of it's like Latin phrases or Greek or something like that, and it relates to things that I've studied and spent a lot of time thinking about in the past. So I would say someone from around the other side of the world is kind of on a level playing field. If if I think of so one example, there's a quote from Socrates, "A cock for Asclepius," right? That wasn't said in English. It wasn't written down in English. Socrates didn't write things down, but the people who heard him say it didn't write it down in English. I know it in English because I speak fucking English. That's not a surprise. I don't speak ancient Greek. I kind of wish I did, but I don't.
Yeah.
So, but someone in Brazil or somewhere can look on the internet and presumably they can find translations of Plato that are in Brazilian Portuguese or whatever it is. So I don't think it's kind of hiding things in that way. There are certain, lyrical or literary sorts of quirks that maybe change things, but no, a lot of the stuff isn't coming from English in the first place. If you talk about someone like My Dying Bride, I remember years and years ago in like fanzine times when you used to get those, I remember seeing a fanzine that featured a literary appraisal of the lyrics on the new Dying Bride release at the time, which was probably like fucking Symphonia Infernus or some really fucking old.
Yeah, fucking old.
And I love the fact that there's a bit of depth, because I think My Dying Bride would probably say something similar. It's like, you don't have to pay attention to that. So just listen to it if you want to.
Yeah.
It sounds nice. We make music. Well, nice is probably the wrong word, but it sounds good.
In the context of metal music anyway.
Yeah, and we're about making sound. But if you want to look more into it, here's, and they're relating to the poetry of Yorkshire or wherever it is they originally came from. And that's great. And I don't see it as that different to us, but the translation thing can be more of an issue for something like that. But most of the things we're referring to is available in all different languages, and English was just one translation of it anyway. And you can find stuff. I mean, I remember years ago there was a song we did, and the title was a bastardization. Do you know that word?
Yep.
It's like a twisting of a quote from Voltaire in French.
Okay.
And then, so it's in French.
Yeah.
And some French people came up to me afterwards and went, "What the fuck is it? No one French would ever say that."
Exactly, but French
I was
are
like,
French.
That's the point.
Because
I'm trying to tell you that it was the Voltaire quote that I was talking about, and we've done something with it.
Yeah.
It's grammatically, it's terrible. It sounds ridiculous.
I think there's a lot of beauty in that. I just happen to work in PR as my day job. So my wording has to be really fucking specific in order to not get twisted by the press. That's, how PR works. But as a hobbyist, when I write reviews, I love bastardizing words because sometimes it's just, in Finnish language, it's beautiful in that sense. You can just twist and turn any kind of a word, and as long as it's kind of a grammatically correct, you can just use it and say like, "Hey, this is." You can say shoutable. No, it's not right. Well, in Finnish it is. Like, you can do it. Finnish language is beautiful in that sense.
That pisses me off. I kind of love the Finnish language because it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
And almost all Westerner, like you go to China or something, I've got no chance. But almost all Western European languages I can figure out a little bit. Yeah. Like we had a thing when we were in the station, harbour, terminal, before we got on the boat today, there were signs and they were in Finnish, Swedish and English.
Yeah.
And I was saying to my guitarist, I bet you I can read the Swedish. I don't speak Swedish, but I bet you I can understand what it says.
Yes.
And I could. And then we looked at the top one. I still hadn't looked at the English. Looked at the top one, the Finnish, and I'm like, I haven't got a fucking clue what that says.
But I mean, I get it. It's really, really fucking hard to understand unless you already have the clues. And because it's nothing related to Nordic languages, which is, then again, the same Latin family, then you know, German, whatever. And so like, what the fuck is this? It's this nonsense language. And I guess that's why Tolkien was like, I'm gonna that make into Elven language. That makes no fucking sense though. It's more alien.
Yeah, it's kind of alien, but at the same time, hooking it back into what we were saying before, if you understand how to interpret the clues, you can start to understand a little more of it.
That basically applies to all linguistics things. But aside from that, let's talk about a little bit of music. I was talking to my friends today when you were playing there, and prior
you should have been listening.
And prior to this whole cruise, maybe a week ago, I was listening to some of your material, kind of refreshing my memory, like how it was, because obviously I've been listening to the stuff back in the days already.
Right.
But obviously sometimes you realize, it was been 20 years ago since I listened to this and that. Yeah. And you're like, how fucking time flies. Now my point is, I'm still yet to figure out how, even though I've reviewed thousands and thousands of albums and I'm supposed to feel like I know how to put things in genre boxes. Right. And when Anaal Nathrakh comes into play, I'm like, how to explain this to a metal newbie? I'm like, there's a little bit of grind in it, but it's not grind. There's lots of black metal in it, but it's not your typical Nordic black metal. Then again, you have these clean vocals, which are pure heavy metal, but you definitely wouldn't describe Anaal Nathrakh as a new wave of British heavy metal to anybody who knows anything about metal. But you have all those things, and sometimes you're almost like borderline flirt, like wing of an eye to metalcore, but you wouldn't never call Anaal Nathrakh a metalcore band.
Right.
So, asking you, how would you define what genre or subgenre or whatever you want to use is Anaal Nathrakh when you're talking about the music itself?
It's kind of a boring answer.
Yeah, but we want that.
You want a boring answer?
Yeah.
Okay, I will try to be as boring as possible. Sure. No, just don't care. It strikes me, having been around music for quite a long time, there are bands who start out and they go, right, we're going to be an X band. We're going to be a death metal band, we're going to be a black metal band, whatever it is.
Sure.
And they go, right, let us find the elements of that thing and embody them and be that thing. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we just didn't think that way about it. Just like, I like that sound, do that. I like that sound, do that. And we were sat in a bar in Turku earlier, and the lads were talking, and they were saying one thing that was kind of cool about some of the older stuff was that there wasn't specifically a way to do X. So Dave was talking, our drummer, and he was talking about, I don't know, the early death metal stuff, like, I'm not going to name the albums he was talking, but like seminal death metal stuff and seminal black metal stuff and seminal thrash stuff. And there wasn't a way to do whatever it is they were doing. There were just lots of people out there trying to go, how do I play the drums faster than everyone else?
Yeah, there was even the competition in a way.
Yeah, but I mean, not just completely the fastest thing ever. That would be just go like that on one drum. But no, actually, but make it cool at the same time. So you know, Dave Lombardo pushed the push the boundary in a certain way. Pete Sandoval, Steve Assheim, whatever it is. They were all trying to push further than everything that existed, but there was no manual for how to do that. So they had more individuality between the different people who were doing it. And it kind of seems like once there is a way of doing something, you get kind of stuck into certain train tracks of how to do things, and then maybe one or two of those train tracks becomes the predominant way, and everyone does it that way. And that's kind of similar with genres. But when you say, yeah, we got some grind, yeah, we got some black metal, yeah, we got some of this, but the people who actually started those things weren't trying to be a thing.
Definitely.
They were just doing what they thought was cool, and they were basing it on what their reference points were, but that's so fucking long ago that most people don't know what they were. Yeah. They just know, yeah, Napalm sound one way, Early Morbid Angel sounds another way, you know, whatever. And we had a similar attitude to that. It's like, I don't know how you do this. I don't know what you're supposed to do. Let's just fucking do stuff that we think's cool, and then not worry about it afterwards.
So not so boring answer after all.
Oh, sorry, I failed.
Sorry, you failed. Interesting answer instead of boring one.
Oh,
but seriously, for example, in terms of like vocals, then this is very dividing thing. Of course, there are lots of death metal fans. Like, I want to hear the David Vincent thing. I want to hear this and that. I want to hear Glenn Benton's and all that stuff. But this guy is singing clean vocals. Okay, I want to hear
what a wanker!
Yeah. Oh, what a fucking douchebag! Like, what the fuck? I wanted to hear the Nocturnal Cultos or Satyrs and whatever. And you're like, hey, fuck you. We can have a little bit of heavy metal here. So what about it? But isn't it challenging when you're like torturing your throat with your like the screamy ones, which are not mild, mind you. I think things are very great because they're so extreme. And the next thing is you just shift your gears to, oh, let's go heavy metal. And isn't that taxing or challenging for you to, manage?
Yeah. And it's even more taxing because I don't know how you're supposed to do any of those things. It's kind of like if you were to do one thing, then you would probably get good at it. And I'm not. Nowadays, there are probably, I don't know, guides on YouTube that tell you how to do it. That's just, if you follow that, it's ridiculous because you should be doing it
by heart.
Because it means something to you. But if you're doing just one thing, you can maybe concentrate on doing that. I don't know how to do it. I do all different voices. I don't know how to do any of them. So yeah, I completely fucked myself up doing it. I'm not sure what the discipline is called. I think it's otolaryngology, I think, is like the anatomical study of the human voice kind of thing. And if one of them looked down my throat, they would probably go, you must stop doing this.
Yeah, this is going to kill you.
Yeah. But I don't know. We don't want to do 6-month-long tours. So if after 3, 4, 5 gigs, I can't sing anymore, it doesn't fucking matter. The sun will still rise tomorrow. We'll still be doing another festival in a month's time or something. So I don't really care about technique or anything. It's just the whole point was never to try to go, okay, now let's do another technique. And what would work here? I know, some heavy metal singer. We just didn't think about that. It's hear the music, what feels right to do on that, do that. And there's quite a lot of times when we've been recording things, because usually I don't hear the music until we start recording. Because to me, that means if I am reacting to the music, there's a more like instinctive thing.
So kind of a primitive reaction in a way.
Yeah, exactly. It's not planning. It's not trying to do something clever. It's just going, that makes me feel this way, so I'm going to try to express something that feels this way. That's good for us, but hopefully, at least, it's kind of good for the listener as well, because they can feel that it's about feeling. But that often means, like, we'll sit there recording, and I'll say to Mick, like, okay, play the next bit, right? I've got my lyric ideas, play it to me, I'll think, how am I going to do this? And I'll go, right, I've got it, press record. It's just crap. So yeah, there's quite a lot of deleted stuff, but a lot of what you hear on our albums and stuff is the first or second take. It's
it's very impro.
Yeah, because it's gut reaction, responding to the music. And to me, that makes the music more worth listening to. I don't know if it does to anyone else, but that's up to them. But it's like, it's real in a way that it couldn't be if you were sat back going, well, how do we approach this moment?
Yeah, I get it. This is very, very unorthodox in a way that a lot of people tend to like, okay, this is how this melody goes, or this is how this riff goes. Should I just put these words like blah, 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 or blah, 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 and all that stuff. I mean, I've been in the bands and I often try to figure it out, and now that you mentioned it, this is very, very interesting that it just totally challenged the usual stuff and kind of invert the whole idea.
What feels right.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that matters.
But do you ever get like, I don't know, maybe fight is too strong a word, but more like, do you ever get like challenged by one another? No, don't do it like this. This is just too much. This is too wild. Or are you just like kind of a shared mind?
That never happens. Not because we necessarily agree, but because we understand what we're good at. So I might suggest a music idea to Mick. Like one of our most well-known songs is Forward, right?
Yeah.
And that has...
I think it's the most played one, actually.
Yeah, by quite some margin on Spotify and things like that. But that's got this machine gun thing. So I suggested the machine gun thing to Mick, and he went, yeah, okay, I'll do that. But if I were to say to him, this song that you've written, no, that bit needs to be in A minor, that bit's... No, I would never say that, because he's better than I am at writing music. And in the same way, he will write songs and he's probably thinking, yeah, this would probably have melodic vocal, that would probably have that. But then when we actually sit and record it, that's not what I do. He would never say to me, that's not the right thing to do, because he knows I'm better at singing than he is.
Will there ever be like the moments when you think Mickey's like going to bed, taking the blanket and like, fuck, he totally fucking discharged the idea. No, I cannot fucking get to sleep. You know?
I hope so. I fucking hope so. That'd be the perfect reaction. Because something unexpected, that's good. Mm-hmm. You know, do something weird, do something strange. There's no problem with that. So there's a lot of like, you mentioned metalcore, for example. It strikes me, might be unfair, but it strikes me listening to some metalcore that it's kind of planned.
Like almost like too much.
Yeah, a little. And that's not to say that metalcore's bad, it's just, you know, tastes are different and, you know, that kind of thing. But to me, that spontaneity, that I don't give a fuck what you thought I was going to do, I've done this now. Wicked, isn't it? Or if you don't think it's wicked, tell me and we'll do something else, but don't judge what the idea is. Just, we can change bits, but we don't tell each other, we're telling people what to do. No. So
you're very, very much like, you have your job, I have mine, so don't dare fucking touch my thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's no don't dare. It's not like, it's not egotistical like that, but it's trust.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean, really. Like, you when you know one another well enough, you don't really need to tell, like, hey, I take care of the wet cheese, you take the meat, and I kind of trust on you at that.
Yeah, we'll get to the end.
All right.
And in the end, we'll both be happy with it. We know we will.
Now, talking about a little bit different topic is that everybody wants nowadays to put bands in certain boxes when it comes to having some kind of a political or societal commentary on, like, this is band that is coming from, say, more left side of politics, especially Americans who like to put it all black and white. You're either left or right. And like a lot of people want to say, okay, this is more liberal, this is conservative, this is right wing, this is left wing, and there's very, very little for bands who are more nihilistic and say, we don't give a fuck, or we're going to challenge both ways. I tend to very much lean myself to more nihilistic wings. And what I notice is that it's getting hate from both parties. Left wing is not saying, oh, you're not siding with us, so you must really be that kind of a thing. And then the right wing is like telling, oh, you're defending that kind of, like, I don't give a fuck. I'm choosing to side with neither of you. Right. So my personal question regarding that is, what is your experience in that when you don't have all these lyrics out there and when you don't make these political statements, how do you feel people boxing you? Or does it concern you? Concern? No, not really.
Probably the major political influence on Anaal Nathrakh is looking at 1984 or something like that and being terrified by it. And to the extent that you can see things like that happening in the world, probably not being happy that that's happening. But we're mostly concerned with, it's not apolitical, I don't want to say that because that's like a cop-out, but it's more concerned with understanding what humans are on a bit more of a fundamental level. Labeling things in terms of political parties and that kind of stuff feels a little bit superficial to me. And we're trying to drive at something that's closer to what human nature actually is. So you could have something that's contentious between, I mean, obviously American politics is fucking everywhere at the moment.
Exactly.
So
it's not like you can hide from it.
No. So take an example that's something that Democrats and Republicans disagree on, or something like that. To me, that's still too surface level. And the reason that some disagreement or some care about that issue exists is somewhere lower than that, that's closer to what humans actually are. And that's what we're driving at. So the closest we would get to what I suppose I would call, I've never thought about it in those words before, but what I'm calling surface level politics is that kind of 1984 authoritarianism, or like, so there's a lot of stuff we've done that's about the First and Second World Wars, for example. But in looking at stuff like that, so one of the songs we did tonight is called Obscene as Cancer, right? And that uses, it's not all quotes, but that uses some of the words from a poem called Dulce et Decorum Est by Wilfred Owen, who was a British First World War poet. And he wasn't saying, why are we fighting this war? I don't like you guys because you voted a certain way. He was saying, I'm in a trench and I'm frightened. And that's what means something to me. I don't care why someone voted some certain way. I care about the human part of it that to me is on some kind of deeper level. So yeah, Republicans, Democrats, that sounds like he said, she said.
Well,
from the perspective we're talking
it's always
about.
like this kind of a silly black and white game that if you choose one way, you're gonna still get fucked in a way.
I mean, again, Second World. So that was First World War I was talking about. Then Second World War, we did a video that was set in trenches. I think it was for that same song, and I explained the idea to people who were doing the video, and they're like, "Oh, wicked! Yeah, we'll get uniforms and everything." I went, "Right, stop. The uniforms that you want to put on people who are in this video, take all insignia off them. I don't want to see a swastika. I don't want to see a British flag. I don't want to see any of that. I want to and the video's on YouTube or something. You can watch it if you want. What I care about is the fact that there was a guy who was in a trench and there was gas and there were people from the other side who were shooting at him, and that's terrifying. And the thing that he thought about was whether it would be better to kill himself. And to me, that kind of, I'm not saying the Nazism doesn't matter. I'm not saying that. I would be opposed to the Nazism if you want to be left and right about it. Yeah. Fucking, what a fucking surprise. Someone thinks Nazis were bad guys. But that's kind of not the point. It's the human part in the middle of it.
Like in the end, it doesn't matter where you're coming from. If you're dying for someone else's cause or war, you're still dying in a fucking trench.
Yeah.
So it's a human value thing in a way.
Yeah. But you say how does it feel? How does it feel to be reacted to? I've only ever seen angry people shouting at us for supporting Democrats.
Okay.
And I'm like, I wasn't supporting the Democrats because I didn't even know the name of the guy that you're saying we were supporting. I don't give a fucking fuck about that. But that kind of thing has only come from one direction. I can't recall anyone progressive shouting at us for being what we were in the same way that people on the other side. But that's an observation about the criticism we've received. It's not about what we were intending to do, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, but I think people like to simplify rather than seeing the kind of shades of grey. They rather want to see like, hey, I want to box you somewhere. And
tough shit.
And I'm like, hey, it's your problem, not mine, that you want to put in the boxes and all that stuff. But coming from this nihilistic territory of sorts and looking at the human nature, would you rather see yourselves as a bad guys, good guys, or just indifferent?
So the perspective of the band is possibly different from my personal perspective.
Well, let's go for the band's perspective.
Yeah,
in this case.
So I kind of think of the band as like the perspective of a demon or something. It's kind of the worst possible perspective you could have, and it's just castigating. It's just being horrible about everything it can see, and that's in the back of my head. So I sit on a bus going home or whatever, and I kind of do think, my God, you insignificant fucking things that you're surrounding me. But that's not all that I think, and you have to talk to people and go to work and talk to your mom or, whatever. You can't exist only in that, part, even though there's something in you that resonates with it. That's not where you can live all the time. But the band can.
Exactly. Now,
it's all from a very negative point of view.
Now, this rings two bells in my head, at least at the very moment. First of all, I was thinking about this old comic book character, the Watcher, who was just merely watching at the mankind doing shit. And the shit can be anything from good to bad or very negative, very positive, whatever. The Watcher wasn't supposed to change things, much like, nature documentary people, when they're watching monkeys doing a monkey thing.
Yeah, they're tearing some cute little animal apart, but you can't touch it.
If they're being nice, you're not touching it. If they're being, raping one another, you're not touching. You're just merely observing. And some people say that's part of the problem if you don't intervene. But at the same time, if you intervene, then you're just changing the course. And this is also always changing the narrative to more or less black and white. And I'm thinking this is very, very philosophical question, which way you want to see it. Like if you intervene, then you're part of the problem. But if you don't intervene, you're also part of the problem in a way. So either way, you're kind of fucked.
Yeah.
And another thing which is always, very, very recently, I made an opinion video about it, because this is very important to me as a fan of music and as a maker of music, is that can you separate the art from the artist? And I'm the firm believer that you can, because it's not like 100% what you put in the music is not exactly the reflection, or more like it can be reflection, but it's not the whole thing. And there you mention it. What the band represents is not exactly the same as you as a person. So,
true.
What's your take on it? I don't want to put my ideas into your head. More like opening a conversation about it. How you feel? Do you think it's one of the same, or are they different?
You can separate things to a certain extent. So I'm not going to sit at home and listen to Screwdriver.
Yeah.
Because I think the tune's cool. Because that's
that's a very, very racist band, so...
No, exactly, yeah. Sorry, people might not know, but they're a neo-Nazi band.
Yeah.
Because what they're doing has that as one of the most important parts of it.
Yeah. They're advocating certain ideas.
Yeah. So I can't separate that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't feel like the music we make has to be my personal approach to things. Like I said before, it would be impossible to live in that way. So I think there can be a separation, but there are limits on that separation.
Yeah, you cannot really role play like, hey, these lyrics are very racist, but I'm not racist. Yeah, obviously you cannot.
Some people can, it seems to me. Maybe I'm wrong, but Bosom. So we're in a black metal sort of environment, right?
That's a good example always when you separate the art from the artist. But then again, I think
anything up to Philosophem I can listen to.
Yeah.
Anything after that, I struggle because it was built in to the point of doing it. But I do think it's possible if something was not built into what the music's point is. To experience it just as music and put everything else to one side. So I don't think it's a clear divide between the two, but those two things are talking to the music and the ideology of the person who made it. They're kind of talking to each other, and there is a point on that continuum at which I start to struggle. So there's a Czech black metal band called Cult Offensive, right? Cult of the offensive, like offensive in a military sense, so cult of the attack kind of thing. I really like their music, and as far as I understand it, they are inspired by Nietzsche and that kind of thing, and I'm a philosophical kind of guy, and I appreciate some of the stuff in Nietzsche, but some of the places that went in history were a bit frightening. So their kind of, and their aesthetic, their artwork, that kind of stuff, looks a lot like some NSBM stuff, but they're quite clear, if asked about it, as I understand it, that is not what they're doing. They just have a particular approach to things, and they're not like cuddly teddy bears. No one's expecting that.
We're talking about extreme metal in the sense.
Yeah, exactly. And we're in the extreme parts of it. So even though it has a certain aesthetic and it sounds a lot like some of the things that have another aesthetic, I don't find in it, maybe I'm mistaken, maybe I've got the wrong end of the stick, but I don't find in it the intention to promote a certain thing. I kind of find them standing back going, this is what we're doing, and what we're doing is kind of elitist, not very nice, and all of that, but fuck off. I can get on board with that. But that's close to the line. I don't know where the line is. That's close to the line, and if you go past that line, then I get uncomfortable, and I don't really want to listen to it anymore.
I'm very much on the same page, and this reminds me of a conversation about 30 years ago with my friend, who was not a metalhead, really, mind you. But we had this conversation about, I think, Bolt Throwers for Victory. You remember the cover?
Yep.
There was, in case people don't know what I'm talking about, Google it, but basically there are people of, British soldiers walking around a beach line or something, which was on Falkland Islands, I think. The very war which most of the people, I wasn't even born when it happened, but I mean, the
1982,
point was,
I think it was.
But wasn't that late? I thought it was 70s. No, what's the 80s?
Maybe I'm wrong. Google it.
Google it anyway. But the point here is, I was too young to understand any of the conflict. And when we were discussing with my friends about it, who was more of this, say, grunge rock guy, and he would never put, if he had a band, that kind of a photography on a piece of album cover. And I'm like, why? Because it's soldiers on the cover. So he saw war, and I'm like, Bolt Thrower has never been promoting war. It was always like an anti-war band, singing about the atrocities of war, the horrible things in war. So this is a very, very interesting conversation for me, because much like you mentioned in the band, like certain ideas are seeping through the cracks and lines and all that stuff. But instead of promoting certain things, you're actually looking at the very enemy of war. Like, this is why you are not supposed to have war, because it's horrible, it's killing people, and it's always these guys in the trenches dying who didn't even know what they signed up for, or maybe they didn't even have the possibility to choose, like, hey, I wanted to have a family life, I wanted to just, play in a band, I wanted to drink beer, fuck girls, and no, you just go to war, shut the fuck up, bitch.
Your country needs you, so start killing.
So when that is reflected in the photography, you can see it two ways: promoting war or being like pro-war, or you can see it like a kind of a statement like, this is not what is supposed to be happening to these young guys.
I don't think you have to see it either way. If if there were insignia, if there were a particular side they were on in that photograph, fair enough. But I don't think you have to necessarily be pro or anti.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that is just very, very.
I don't want to hide from coming down one side or the other, but I think you can. The musical perspective can just be, look, this happens, this is happening, and there are all sorts of different people that you could insert into that same thing, and this is a phenomenon that happens in human society, and I maybe misunderstand Bolt Thrower, but I know them. And I take them to be looking at it more in that kind of a way. They're describing things that are actually happening. In a way. Yeah. And that doesn't mean that you're on either side of it. That's not the same thing as hiding from being on either side of it.
Exactly.
But yeah, to me, an analogy might be mid-90s era Marilyn Manson, right?
Yep.
So he's using great big drapes on the stage, and they have lightning bolt signs on them that are like a red circle with a black symbol in the middle. Kind of reminds you of things that may have happened in the bit. Yeah, exactly. But he's doing that to suggest that something is the case about, in his case, American society.
Yeah.
And he's embodying things that he's not saying are good. Yeah. He's showing you the very worst of what's going on, just to touch upon the fact that that goes on.
Kind of a provoking in a sense.
Yeah, it's provocative, but that's not the same as endorsement.
Exactly.
I mean, it turns out maybe he's a rapist. I don't fucking know. It's in the news now, so yeah, it's kind of tainted to say that I think Marilyn Manson had the right idea. I'm not saying that, but what he was doing with that persona at the time, and reflecting back at society what it was, in a way that's more accurate than what society tells itself. And it's going, no, actually, you just think it's about going to the supermarket and it's going to, I don't know, a square dance at the weekend or whatever. No, this is happening actually.
So it's more like...
Look at it.
So it's more like marketing versus reality, in a way.
Yeah, but it was a satire on marketing.
Yeah, but I mean, like, what the society likes to say, hey, it's all good, everything is fine, don't worry about it. At the same time, the rebellious rock and roll people are like, what the fuck, this is not fucking okay. You're in the army now.
Yeah,
kind of a thing.
Some of that kind of thing. But just pointing out that something exists is not the same thing as endorsing it.
Exactly.
And I think that's what Bolt Thrower would want to say. We're not jingo, we're not being nationalists because we used, Falklands. That was an example of a fucking horrible experience.
That was what really happened.
Yeah.
Going back to today's topics, nowadays we still have wars. Nothing has really changed in human history in the sense that, okay, we might have...
I don't know, we've got a lot better at it.
Yeah, I mean, we technically speaking, if you look at the statistics, we have fewer conflicts these days.
Yeah, but we can kill loads more people.
Yeah, we just
quickly.
have it easier nowadays. So does it ever make you cynical, like, what the fuck we're even supposed to do here? Because eventually we still end up killing each other, or is there actually hope?
So your question to me, in my role as in Anaal Nathrakh is,
yes,
does it make you cynical and are you hopeful?
Yes, that's very good that you...
yes
asked.
And no, in that order. Yeah, massively cynical. The thing that pisses me off more than anything is the extent to which more and more of that tale telling happens, and more less and less understanding is directed at what's actually happening. Like I said before, I'd rather be subsurface. What is going on here? What are humans doing to one another in a way that we will look at in 1,000 years and try and figure out? And yes, I think there are massive grounds for cynicism. So why is most of the stuff that's happening at the moment? You need to either stop paying attention to the news or read all of it and feel sick at the way things are lately. It's kind of, there is no in between, because things are going so much all the fucking time. Why is that happening? I think mostly because of very, very bad things about what humans are. I don't think it's happening because someone voted a certain way or is an advocate for a certain policy. I think there are drivers for that are far more fundamental. Don't look at Trump, look at Peter Thiel. Don't look at J.D. Vance, look at the people who pay for him. And the same thing's happening in the UK, and I understand that Finland's had some issues, but it's not to do with the people who are actually, held upon a stick going, clap or say boo, that's bollocks. What's actually happening is far deeper than that. That's why it's far more widespread, and there's lots of countries that are going in a certain direction and that kind of thing. So yeah, massively cynical and not very hopeful, but not for those surface reasons.
Let's steer this back to the music before we conclude.
Yeah.
If there was nothing of these, bad sorts of things happening, if everything was, say, pink and nice and all smiley, happy things, would bands like Anaal Nathrakh even exist? Would be the point to exist if everything was already all Disney?
Show me a world in which that's the case, and I'll give you an answer.
Fair point.
Because there was a guy who was famous in UK comedy. His name was Jeremy Hardy, and he was very, very like left wing, but he was more importantly, he was very, very angry about the way things were going wrong in society, and he was interested in being a satirist. So satire, taking the piss out of people in power. And I can't remember he's dead now. It was a few years ago. But something happened that was bad, politically speaking, and someone said to him, "Oh, I bet you're happy about that because you've got, a new hour's worth of material that you can
pretty
write
much like Ricky Gervais in a way."
Yeah, that's more complicated. But but he said, "No, I'm not happy because I do my job.
Yeah,
I do my job because I'm unhappy."
Yeah.
And
so being happy would make him unemployed in a way.
Kind of. Yeah, but
he would be happier.
For something like the Nathrakh perspective that I was talking about, maybe personally, if everything was all sweetness and light, maybe I'll be happy then. But yeah, maybe I wouldn't want to make music about why everything isn't right. But that doesn't mean that I'm happy because we get to make music. We make the music we do because I'm deeply unhappy about lots of things. So yeah, maybe in a world that was all lovely, we wouldn't be doing it. But there is no world that was all lovely.
And it's not going to happen during our lifetimes anyway, so we don't have to worry about it.
Now you're asking me if there's any hope.
Exactly. Well, I'm not too hopeful about it. I just try to be optimistic, but that's one other thing than being hopeful.
Yeah. Hold your children close.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that makes things a little bit better. Now, before we conclude, what is the future for Anaal Nathrakh looking like? Let's project for, say, 3-5 years.
Yeah, some new music would be nice. The last album we did, I think, came out in 2020, so it's been a while. But I don't know if you remember, there was a thing that happened around 2020 that kind of changed things a lot. And during that time, Mick, my partner in crime in it, started some new projects and stuff, and they really took off. So he basically does not get time to himself at all anymore. He used to, but not anymore. He's really busy. But we had a chat since then, and it was literally, shall we just say, no more Anaal Nathrakh. Too busy nowadays, got too much stuff going on. And we agreed, Mick said to me, why say no? It's just for now.
Yeah.
Really fucking busy, can't do it or anything. So yeah, let's do a new album. It just might be in 4 years or something before he gets a chance to do it. So I don't know when, but the idea is, we'll see what happens, but the idea is that we would do more stuff eventually. So I don't know when, but it is not dead. We are so far still planning to do more new music in the future. We just have no idea when it will be.
Does the plan also apply, doing more live?
Yeah, I think so, partially because Mick did that stuff, and partially because no one could play any shows or anything. We spoke about the idea of just not doing shows or anything. Because both of us, me and Mick, we find playing live very, very difficult and stressful. Not everyone does, and I'm not crying about it, I'm not asking for sympathy, it's just we find it hard. So I remember speaking to Mick in like 2022 or something and saying, you know what, I was thinking maybe of doing like a last show or something. And he said, look, I can't do it, but do it. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll put a band together, we play a show. I say to all the fans, I know you wish Mick would be here, but he can't be, but we wanted to do this one last time. But then we did that, and it was a really good gig. It was this quite big venue in London, it was sold out, all of that business. Yeah. And so I started thinking, well, in that case, let's kind of separate the studio and the live thing. I find it hard, but I'm happy to do it. I'm very grateful to people. I'm not complaining, but very grateful to people who turn up. And Mick's doing his thing, but let's take them apart. So I'll put a live band together, and we'll play. And then Mick can join in if he wants to, but he's not allowed to all the time. And so that's the way we've been doing it since. And it used to be that when we first did the first few shows after that, I would literally stop the gig halfway through and I would say, look, I know there's a guitarist who isn't stood next to me, but he couldn't be here, but we wanted to be able to, enjoy all of this with you guys and that kind of stuff. And people were totally understood, and we're all just, yeah, we don't give a fuck, let's have a mosh pit.
Yeah, exactly.
And so after a while of doing that, we're like, you know what, let's just do gigs. People don't have to come, but so long as people are coming, we'll fucking do it. And then eventually we'll put a new album out, and then we'll probably, after that, still play shows that Mick won't be able to come to, but no one fucking cares anyway. And we'll just go and have an anarchic, horrible time.
That sounds like a fair deal.
Yeah, so we've kind of split it into live and studio even more than it was before, but there's no particular reason not to do either of them. Yeah. So
I think it's serving the fans anyway.
I think so, yeah. I mean, if someone comes up to me and says, stop this! You fucking arsehole, how dare you? Well, I mean, if one person says that, that wouldn't be the first time. But, if the fans all turn around en masse and go, look, we're not interested in hearing from you, stop doing this rubbish, it's ridiculous. Well, fair enough, but no one's saying that.
I mean, I totally hear you. One of my favorite gigs of all time was, because I'm a big Dog Throne fan, was seeing, Nocturnal Calto. So half the band performing with, Satirican Live.
Roadburn, yeah.
No, it was Wacken 2004.
Okay, right.
And I was like, this is the best thing ever. Because it was like the only chance for me to see any kind of Dog Throne live.
Yeah, there might be some kind of perfect thing that you're not getting, but in the meantime...
So it was like, okay, this is half a Dog Throne, but backed up with Satirican guys, and 30 minutes of that was like some of the best black metal I've ever get to see live. So I don't get to complain. I feel like I'm already obliged to be there. So in that sense, I'm totally like, go fucking do it. Yeah. Because there will be
they weren't lying to you about what it was going to be. You knew what it was, and you loved it.
Yeah, and it's not like it's a cover band anyway, because it's like half the band is still there. So that's way more than having those, 30 years of old bands where like one member only and the rest of the new guys. And
it doesn't feel like that the way we're doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
There's only two of us and there's only one of us who's doing it, but I mean, I've got most of Akakaki sat behind me doing it. And to me, that's a credible kind of group of people to be working with.
Yeah. So, well, man, we would love to do this for hours and hours. This is so great. So let's plan a next interview in a few years, and we'll be picking up from this. Now I'll have to let you go. This was a great pleasure to
Probably
me.
longer than you meant, but yeah.
I would always talk for hours if I got the possibility, but you have to draw the line somewhere. So thank you, people. Thank you so much for the gig and for this interview. And people, I hope you get to learn a little bit more from the band and the thinking behind the band before this one. So now when you have the possibility, don't even think for a second, oh, it's only the half the band. Go to see them live, go check out the albums, and in case you want to do a little bit of puzzle playing with the lyrical content, do that. Do yourself a favor. Now, this is Nordic Metal Cruise 2025. This is Anaal Nathrakh. This is Rauta. And now we've... good night.
Ta-ra.
Thank you so much. This was a truly great in-depth conversation. I'll just take the mic. And before I let you go, mandatory WAM reference. Well, let's take a quick...